attaining a teacher on the second, which is falah al-ihsan, the spiritual wayfaring. When a person takes a spiritual guide, that is referred to as a Shaykh al-Khas, a specific teacher, as opposed to the first. The first is a Shaykh al-Am, a general teacher, who teaches you Islam, teaches you correct belief, teaches you rulings, teaches you the elements of the heart and how to kill those elements. But the second, which is falah al-ihsan, a person has a Shaykh al-Khas, a specific guide. This is when people take the oath of allegiance with someone and they enter what we know as a-tariqah, the spiritual path. These turuq paths have different names. You have Naqshbandi, Chishti, and many other paths with different names. When a person takes a guide from these spiritual paths, that guide is referred to as al-Murshid al-Khas, the specific guide. Now, with regard to this specific guide, he mentions that the spiritual guides, which are Murshid Khas, are also divided in two types. You have Shaykh Ittisal, the connected Shaykh, and Shaykh Isal, the one who connects. A distinction between the two. One is connected and one connects others. So if someone gives the oath of allegiance to the first type, which is known as a Shaykh al-Ittisal, the connected Shaykh, Al-Imam Ahmadullah Khan rahimahullah ta'ala mentions that he has some conditions. Firstly, that this Shaykh that a person believes will take him on the spiritual path is referred to as Shaykh Ittisal. By the way, this fatwa was misquoted by someone also. How was it misquoted? That they don't mention the Shaykh Isal and what taking the Shaykh Ittisal entails. Taking the Shaykh Ittisal, does it entail that a person will attain falah al-ihsan? Does it mean that? No, it doesn't. If someone has Shaykh Ittisal, it does not guarantee him to have falah al-ihsan, success in the station of ihsan. So the conditions are four for a Shaykh Ittisal. Number one, that that person has a connected chain back to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So anyone who takes the oath of allegiance with a spiritual guide, that spiritual guide must have taken the spiritual path with a spiritual guide. That spiritual guide must have taken the path from a spiritual guide. This continues with connection all the way back to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Otherwise, you have numerous people. The father was a spiritual guide. The father passed away, and the son claims that he took the spiritual path from his father. This would lead to the spiritual path being the pathway here being defunct. I mean, there is no spirituality because there is a gap, a lacuna in the chain. There is a gap, and therefore there is no spiritual sustainability for that spiritual path. And this happens throughout the Muslim world. If you go to many claimants to spirituality today, you investigate their chain, you will find that many of them claim that they took the spiritual path from such and such person or from their father, but when you look deeper into those claims, you will find that there is a gap in the chain. Or it is not proven that the person may have studied the spiritual path or traversed the spiritual path under those whom he claims he has traversed the path with. In the same way, he mentions that the person you take the spiritual path with must be sahih al-aqeedah, meaning his creed must be correct. So what does this entail? Before anyone decides to take the spiritual path with an individual, he must know his own creed. So what tends to happen in this day and age is that people do not know their basic creed, they do not know their basic fiqh, rulings, jurisprudence, what they need to know. They do not know about the ailments of the heart, yet they are recruited into a tariqah, into a group, and they are told to follow a spiritual guide. They will stay with that spiritual guide for many years. They will never learn their creed. They will never learn their fiqh rulings. In fact, they go to others to learn these things. And in many cases, rather than curing those spiritual ailments of the heart, those ailments are enlarged in that group. For instance, they become rivals to another group, or they start having riya, ostentation, within that group. So this is something to analyze before taking the spiritual path. We will have to analyze whether the chain of the claimant is connected. We will have to analyze, is he correct in his belief? So in order to know that, you need to know your own belief. And thirdly, you would have to analyze, if I join this group, how am I benefiting? Am I joining this group so I can attain a rank in the group? Is the spiritual guide encouraging a competition amongst these students? This is what tends to happen. Sometimes the claimant of spirituality encourages the elements of the heart amongst these students in order to use those elements towards his advantage, like taking money and different types of abuses that take place in these groups. The third point that is mentioned is that the person is an alim, a scholar. What is the meaning of a scholar? That he is able to take his essential beliefs from the sources of Islam independently, without the help of another scholar. This is the meaning of a scholar. Beliefs and teachings of Islam, being able to access those beliefs and teachings from the sources of Islam without the help of anyone else. This is the meaning of a scholar. So how many Sufi orders we have in our midst that claim to follow the Sufi path, yet the spiritual masters are unable to do this? They would not fall into even the category of Shaykh Ittisal. Then the fourth point which is mentioned by Imam Ahmad al-Bakhan rahimahullah ta'ala, that the person is not a fasiq mu'lim. Fasiq mu'lim is someone who breaks the divine law openly, meaning he does not follow the Sharia. If he does so, he is not fit enough to be Shaykh Ittisal, the connected Shaykh. These are the conditions of a Shaykh Ittisal. If we observe anyone who claims to be a spiritual guide, we would have to ask them, or their students, is your guide a Shaykh Ittisal or is he Shaykh Isal? If he is Shaykh Ittisal, then does he fulfill these four conditions? And we would have to observe, does this person have a connected chain? Does he have knowledge? Does he have the correct creed? And does he break the laws of Sharia? Then if they claim he's Shaykh Isal, he would have to fulfill these four conditions and more conditions. Those conditions, Imam Ahmad al-Bakhan rahimahullah gives an example of Imam al-Zaylai rahimahullah ta'ala, who states that regarding a person who is a fasiq, a person who breaks Sharia, في تقديمه للإمامة تعظيمه وقد وجب عليه إهانته شرعا. That by placing a fasiq, a person who breaks Sharia, forward to lead the prayer is impermissible. Why? Because legally speaking, it is essential for people to do his ihana. Ihana means the opposite to ta'zim, opposite to reverence, meaning not to revere him. So by placing him forward to lead the prayer, you are revering him. So he's saying that if a person who commits transgression is unfit to lead the prayer, how would such a person be fit enough to lead others in the spiritual path? We have many claimants to the spiritual path today. They do not fulfill these four conditions, yet they do not claim to be Shaykh Ittisal. They claim to be Shaykh Isal. And in many cases, they claim to be the Ghaus, the pole saint. The Ghaus, the main saint of his time, or Al-Qutb, the pole saint. Or they claim to be Abdul from the 40 saints. And so many different titles that are given to them. So it is essential upon us to be vigilant and observe, does this person fulfill these 4 criteria? But at the same time, he should not fall into the mistake of observing these people to take out their faults. This is also a mistake. And Imam Ahmad Zarruq, rahimahullah ta'ala, in the beginning of Uddatul Murid Sadiq, a book he wrote on the Sufi path, he mentions in the inside cover that do not read this book to take out faults out of others. Because if you are doing this, then you are falling into the trap of shaitan, which is one of the major sins, to have bad thoughts about other Muslims. We only observe these people when they attempt to recruit us. In many cases, they will come to our masajid. They especially come to the masajid of Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah from the subcontinent. Why? Because the Indian subcontinent has preserved, in the most part, the traditional Sufi path. And the people are still aware of what tasawwuf is. Therefore, they term this congregation as flock. I don't like using the word flock, because a flock is made from sheep. But we are told that we do not do taqleed in our aqeedah, so we are not sheep. But they attempt to recruit people from the Indian subcontinent, mainly because our people are open to the concept of tasawwuf. And secondly, because of money, because our people give money generously. So, when we have these claimants of tasawwuf, we should observe, do these people fulfill the conditions of Shaykh Ittisal, which are these 4 conditions? As for Shaykh Isal, which is the other category, Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned that that person must have, apart from these 4 conditions, he must also be a master of knowing how to deal with people, knowing the trickery of shaitan and the ego, and being able to give the relevant cure to every individual. So people claim to be Shaykh Islam, they must be very good at looking at every aspirant, every student, and being able to pinpoint the particular problem of that person and taking them through the spiritual path. Remember, Al-Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani rahimahullah ta'ala has a book known as Mawazin al-Qasirin min Shuyukh wa Muridin, which is a short book where he places stringent conditions on a Shaykh al-Isal. He places very stringent conditions that if someone were to read that book, you would be very surprised at the conditions he places, but we will not go into that. But Al-Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala places 15 conditions on a Shaykh al-Isal. Al-Imam Ahmad al-Khan rahimahullah ta'ala very quickly goes through what a Shaykh al-Isal is, a Shaykh who makes others connect to the spiritual path. After this, he mentions that the oath of allegiance, bay'ah, which is given in this day and age, bay'ah which people give in this day and age, he mentions that these bay'ah, these oath of allegiance, are 2 types also. How many people here have given bay'ah, oath of allegiance, to a Sufi guide? Put your hand up if you have. How many of you have been told what type of bay'ah this is? Very few people. This tends to happen in some Sufi orders today, that the spiritual guides do not tell the aspirant that in reality he is not doing suluk. The oath of allegiance that he is taking is for barakah, blessings. So Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala states that the first type of bay'ah is bay'atul barakah, which is for taking blessings from the silsila. This is only if the spiritual guide has those four conditions. When he fulfills those four conditions, the aspirant takes the oath of allegiance. When he takes the oath of allegiance, this is for blessings. How does he attain blessings? That spiritual guide is connected to his spiritual guide. That spiritual guide is connected to his spiritual guide, all the way back to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is the source of blessings. And these blessings pass down. So this bay'atul barakah for blessings. But Al-Imam Ahmad al-Ghaffar rahimahullah makes a very special note here, that this bay'ah would only be valid if the intention is valid. If the intention is for a worldly benefit, then the bay'ah does not count. So many people will give the oath of allegiance just to make business contacts in the particular tariqah, silsila, in the particular silsila, to make business contacts, or worldly contacts, or to get married, or to remove a jinn. If they have some people need exorcism done, so they join the tariqah. But in many cases, those orders are not able to help them, and then they leave. So this taking barakah, bay'atul barakah, is permissible, based upon the hadith, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum." Whoever imitates the people is amongst them. The mistake many people make today is that they enter a silsila. If that silsila fulfills the four conditions, they have entered it for barakah, blessings. The mistake they do is that they think they are entering the silsila as a salik, and then they think of themselves as being better than other Muslims, and they fall into a greater mistake. What the vast majority of us must realize is that those who have taken the spiritual path are in fact those people who have taken bay'atul barakah, the people who have taken the oath of allegiance for blessings. When a person realizes this, they will not fall into self-conceit. And this is only when the Shaykh has those four conditions. Otherwise, many claimants to the Sufi path today do not even fulfill those four conditions when we analyze them. So he quotes again Shihabuddin al-Saharwardi rahimahullah ta'ala from Awarif al-Ma'arif, stating, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْخِرْقَةَ خِرْقَتَانِ خِرْقَةُ الْإِرَادَةِ وَخِرْقَةُ التَّبَرُّكِ والأصل الذي قصده المشايخ للمريدين خرقة الإرادة وخرقة التبرك تشبه بخرقة الإرادة فخرقة الإرادة للمريد الحقيقي وخرقة التبرك للمتشبه وللمشبه به ومن تشبه بقوم فهو منهم. Here it states that know that the khirqa, which is the garment which is placed, khirqa, what they do in the Sufi path is when someone takes the spiritual path, they place a garment, a cloak over them. This is passed on from, they say, from Al-Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah ta'ala. So they refer to this as khirqa, taking the spiritual path. This is divided into two types. Khirqatul irada, which we would say bay'atul irada, entering the spiritual path with the intention of doing suluk, wayfaring. And the second one is khirqatul tabarruk, entering the spiritual path for blessings. He states the original principle which the mashayikh would intend for the seekers was khirqatul irada. Which one? Khirqatul irada. And as for khirqatul tabarruk, taking the spiritual path for blessings, then what they intended by this is imitating the real aspirants, the real murideen. He states that the khirqatul irada was intended lil murid al-haqiqi, for the real murid. So people who have taken the oath of allegiance to any shaykh, they must firstly look as to whether that shaykh is shaykh ittisal, which is the minimum condition. And then they must analyze the oath of allegiance that they have taken. Is it for blessings? This is based upon yourself, your own station. But if the Shaykh is Shaykh Ittisal, by default your bay'ah, your oath of allegiance will be for barakah. If the Shaykh is not Shaykh Ittisal, then you are not a Salik. The real Salik is the one who does saluk with the Shaykh Ittisal, which the conditions for that are very stringent. A Shaykh Ittisal is the likes of a Shaykh Abdul Al-Jilani radiallahu anhu. So, to summarize this speech, remember that for the conditions for the Shaykh Ittisal, what were mentioned was that he has a connected chain, he has knowledge, he does not have open transgression, but what was also mentioned was Sahih al-Aqeedah, that he has correct belief. And in order to determine whether the person is correct in belief, a person needs to learn his creed himself. How can you observe others, the creed of others, and analyze the creed of someone else if you do not know your own creed? So Aqeedah is very essential. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah mentions those people who in his time have taken students, but yet their creed is corrupt. They have taken students for the spiritual path, yet their creed is corrupt. But further down in the fatwa, he mentions also the spiritual aspirant who gives bay'ah, oath of allegiance, to a Shaykh Isal, a connecting Shaykh. If the aspirant is true, al-muridu sadiq, the true murid, and the Shaykh fulfills the conditions of being a Shaykh al-Isal, this is the spiritual path with regard to which the scholars said, Man la shaykha lahu fa shaytanun shaykhuhu. Whoever does not have a shaykh, a guide, then shaytan is his guide. And the example of this, the shaytan attempting to deviate someone, was when a Shaykh Abdul Al-Jilani radiallahu anhu was in the wild, in the wilderness, and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and shaytan appeared, illuminated, and said, I am your Lord and you are forgiven from everything. And a Shaykh Abdul Al-Jilani radiallahu anhu read La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and sought refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then shaitan attempted to deviate him again, saying, you have been saved by your knowledge, meaning your knowledge of Tawheed. And a Shaykh Abdul Al-Jilani radiallahu anhu read La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah again, because the source of his guidance is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not his knowledge. This is in reference to the spiritual path. If someone does not have a guide on this spiritual path, he is misguided. But the mistake many people have fallen into in this day and age is that the spiritual guides they have taken do not fulfill even the conditions of a Shaykh Ittisal, and they themselves have not removed the elements of their heart, and they enter a spiritual path, and then the result is what we see, that we have claimants today to tasawwuf that are what people refer to as Sufi cults in our midst. These Sufi cults, in fact, do not exemplify real tasawwuf and have been one of the major causes for many people leaving the fold of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah.